sponsored by mywebsitefinder.net, where you can find reliable website hosting, email services, and affordable domain prices. A proudly woman-owned mywebsitefinder.net can cater to all your website needs, big or small. You can have a website up in less than an hour using sophisticated yet easy-to-use web tools like cPanel and WordPress. And for our Spanish-speaking friends, check out paginaus.com. Now let's get to the show. Dimethyltryptamine, also known as DMT, is a fascinating mystery. A chemical substance that has been known to make one see the universe. Some even say God. It is found in various plants and animals, including humans. Indigenous tribes around the world use these plant medicines in ceremony, including the Matsis in Peru, with the brew they call ayahuasca. In this episode, I interview author Dick Kahn, and we talk about his experience with DMT, which is also the subject of his book, DMT and My Occult Mind. He documented his personal research with DMT, spending a year investigating by using himself as the test subject. Please enjoy this interview with Graham Hancock's Author of the Month, Dick Kahn. Yeah. Well, I think we should get started. I want to talk, first of all, about when you started thinking about writing this book. What was the kind of, thing that made you want to share all your experiences?
The catalyst to writing was actually a famous actor. I think he's also known as a national treasure in the UK, Stephen Fry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, from Blackadder. I regret to say, but I loved him in Blackadder, but otherwise I'm not his biggest fan. But but he was giving this speech, and I was sat with my wife, and I was quite a few experiences into DMT by that time, and documenting, but with no intention to publish. And he was giving a speech at an award ceremony and praising writers and authors, and said, look, if anybody's minded to sort of pursue that, then he gave all encouragement. And I heard it, and I was inspired by him, and at that moment I said, I'm gonna write a book about my DMT experiences. And from that moment, I never looked back, just overcame each and every obstacle until I published.
Well, that's very brave in itself, I think, because a lot of, I was a journalist and have been wanting to write a book all my life, and to just go for it, I think is very brave, because, where do you find the time to do it?
When I look back, because I'm a parent, and I'm married, and I've got a full-time job, which is not as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a good husband, a good parent, and hold down a responsible job, I look back, it's like, how did I find the time? I mean, thankfully, the DMT experience itself is very short-lived, and you're back to baseline very quickly. But in terms of the writing, I mean, I made the time. So it was lots and lots of hard work, but so enjoyable.
So when you had your experiences, when you were doing the experiment, when you were coming down on it, is that when you were were you writing notes right after the experiences?
So after coming back from the experiences, which would usually be me laying on the bedroom floor or the floor at the top of the stairs or outside in the garden, I would remain laid and reflect on what had happened and try and gather up accurate details without, embellishing anything, until I'd got it fixed in my mind. And there were some experiences where I'd be able to pull a little bit back, and then after resting for a while, yeah, I would write it up. I've written under the sort of influence of DMT, albeit when you're coming down and
Mm-hmm.
you're having those big yawns. And there were times where a day or two later I'd have another experience, and it was after that experience facts from the previous experience would just
Mm.
suddenly flood into my mind. It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, oh my god, I forgot all about that. So I was able to go back to the previous experiment and add further accurate detail to that, as well as compose, I think the word is contemporaneously, while it's fresh in my memory, the facts of the experience. But yeah, that was my approach.
And it's very difficult, I think, to write um and explain those experiences, because I've done ayahuasca like four
Yeah,
times. I did
yeah.
mushrooms last week. I did the truffles last week.
Wow.
And
Okay.
trying to explain to my husband, who I don't think he's ever done the psilocybin, but like trying to explain how like the things that I saw and the experiences that I had while under the that
So,
it's so.
so
How did
you,
you do it?
I mean, when you experience something that you couldn't imagine and you can't even explain, you just can't bring that back. I mean, there's experiences I've had where I've been looking at something, I don't know, it's an impossible object.
Mhm.
It's wonderful, it's morphing, it's beautiful. I can't tell you anything about it. I just can't bring any of that detail back. But my approach was to try and understand the causal nature of the experiences. I really thought I was going somewhere,
Mhm.
and over time, I feel I made some valuable insights, and found that I wasn't actually going anywhere, but something was coming to me and engulfing me within its powerful mind and imposing visually or in other ways upon me. Once I'd kind of got a handle on that, every other experience kind of fed into that. I didn't really focus on the visions. I've wrote about what I've seen as best I can, but it was
Mhm.
more what's happening here, what's really at play, because it's such a otherwise unimaginable experience until you've experienced it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And when you write about your childhood in the beginning of the book, I think it's so interesting because you were already kind of awake to that. And a lot of people who have done, DMT or, any kind of psychedelics might not have had any kind of experiences when they were, when they were younger. I mean, tell me about that, about your childhood.
well, it's really kind of you to say that, but I mean, my background, my childhood was idyllic. Regrettably, my parents never pushed me at school, and the area I was in was very working class. And I knew I wanted to leave as soon as I was old enough. So yeah, those experiences in childhood, they became valuable much later in life when I first experienced DMT. And I've said in other interviews that the tinnitus that I've has been persistent throughout my life, but was such a significant part of my early childhood. Upon first experiencing DMT and finding that sound amplified in intensity and increased in frequency, I was so enamored by it. I thought, it was just such a big impact on me because that had been such a huge part of my early childhood. So it's not that I felt awake to these, and I'd experienced psychedelics as in late teens and early adulthood, but then I don't know, I wouldn't want to say I'd moved away. I'd maintained a healthy habit with cannabis, weed, and skunk, and that became regrettably all consuming. And so yeah, I mean, many years passed with no proper psychedelics, but a bad habit addiction to weed and skunk, and even you know, with that, I managed to progress to university and get a reasonably good job, and you know, found somebody willing to marry me.
Well,
And
I think,
I've since quit that. You know, I mean,
yeah.
you know, there was a bit of a hiccup in my employment, which was, you know, due to cannabis. Tell it like it is.
Hmm.
I I basically wanted to earn some, and I ended up going overseas to Africa, thinking I could earn lots of money doing something in the financial sector, which I had no experience in, and left behind a 6-month-old child, a pregnant wife, and a mortgage.
Mm.
And after 6 months in Africa, came back with my tail between my legs. And yeah, you know, there's a period of unemployment, and after that, I said, you know what, let's leave this weed alone now. You know, let's try and get serious. And yeah, where we're at now is pretty good.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when taken to, you know, they're doing studies about medicinal marijuana and all those kinds of things. I think if you do it in a, if you're in a place that you just need some kind of healing, and you're not doing it like every day, you're stoned out of your
Yeah,
mind, you
yeah,
know, I think
yeah,
that could actually be helpful, you know.
absolutely. I'm a real big fan of it. The fact that I don't smoke it anymore doesn't mean I'm against it. I'm a
Mhm.
real big fan of it. In fact, somebody sent me some about a year ago, some strains of skunk that he'd grown, and I'd not touched it for 10 years. And I said, I'm going to smoke some. And I smoked some, and I tell you what, I realized how psychedelic it actually is.
Mhm.
And I had a newfound respect for it, because before I had been abusing it, and that's my
Yes.
bad, you know. But it's a really powerful, potent, and it's a wonderful medicine. And I agree with what you say. There are lots of healing capacities within that.
Yeah, I think people, like people who have bad trips on mushrooms, they're doing it recreationally. They're doing it just to, you know, I don't want to say just to get high or whatever, but they're doing it for the, I think, the wrong reasons. And
Yeah,
I feel, you know, with my research and my experience, that those plant medicine is to be respected. I mean, it's a gift from our indigenous ancestors, I think, you know. And that's another thing I wanted to ask you. So you've done the psilocybin and you've done DMT, and you just said you've done weed as well. Do you find that every plant has its own personality, or every kind of thing that you take has its own, um yeah, its own personality, and it's completely different, like the mushrooms are different from, completely different from the DMT? I mean, tell me a little bit about.
yeah. I mean, you know, with the mushrooms and the DMT, there's some chemical connection there. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know the chemical formula, but there's some uh, relatedness between psilocybin and freebase DMT. And you know, again, through social media, I'm blessed with some wonderful friends, and somebody kindly sent me some Liberty Cap mushrooms, which she dried out, and I'd not had them for such a long time. And I took in this room, I took a small dose. It was like 1.5 grams, and I thought it's going to be okay. And it was so strong. It was like
Oh.
being on ayahuasca, you know. And I've had strong ayahuasca, and it was like, wow. I thought I'd be able to do things, and I just had to submit and lay on this bed and just go with it. It was so strong, and I was surprised at how much like ayahuasca that was. I mean, there's plant medicines, and then there's also, you know, synthetic drugs, and I've had the opportunity to experience 2CB, and I know a lot of people who are adherents just to the plant medicines will
Mhm.
probably balk at what I'm about to say, but I'm a real big fan of that substance, 2CB. Such a fan that I will only try it once or twice a year, because I consider it so beautiful and magical, and that certainly has its own. personality. I've also recently had experiences with the toad medicine, and yeah, I mean, what to say about that? I mean, that's just an insanely powerful substance, and I don't think I've come to terms with its personality yet. It's just so strong.
Oh, are you talking about because there's different types of the toad medicine. There's the one that they they burn on their skin. That's not what you're talking about, right?
No, I think that's Cambo,
Oh
and
yeah,
I think
Cambo.
yeah, I've not experienced that, but I have friends who've experienced it and told me all about it, and I'm not against it. It's just uh to go to a ceremony, they ask for money, and I've because I'm a parent, I can always like spend money on other things.
Yeah.
So, and obviously with a lockdown, but yeah, I'd like to try it. I understand it's a really strong purgative.
Yeah, and you have to be careful. A lot of those things are kind of scammy and they're like spas, they're like resorts instead of,
Okay.
instead of going to like the jungle in Peru, you're going to like a spa setting and it's completely
Okay.
different.
Okay. Okay. Have you tried it?
Oh, ayahuasca? Oh, combo? No, no, I haven't done
Okay.
that.
Okay. Okay.
No. But I have a friend, he lives in Texas and he introduced me to all that um probably in 2015. Um and they do ceremonies. He has land out in Texas, so they do the ceremonies out there. So
Yeah.
it's
Sounds
quite
good.
an experience out in the middle of nowhere under the stars in a, sleeping in a tent.
That sounds wonderful. It really does.
But you can't do that. You can't do that now with everything going on. Um how
It's difficult.
has how has this situation changed you, because you wrote the book and the book was published before any of this happened. Um
You mean this
how
pandemic
yeah.
situation? I'm just going to be honest and say it hasn't. I mean, first of all, I'm really fortunate. I'm able to work, and
Mhm.
my heart goes out to businesses and people who have lost or losing jobs. I can't even begin to imagine that. So I'm in a very privileged position, I guess, in that my job seems reasonably secure. Um, apart from not being able to take my boys where places I'd like to take them, cinema, go-karting, motorbiking,
Mhm.
you know it's not I've not let it impact me or my family. We've remained positive, we've remained good, and I see like this, I'm blessed in that I've got some very potent medicines that I can explore with from time to time, that they're always there for me.
Mhm.
uh, you know um, Whilst the opportunities may be reduced because of homeschooling and working from home, when the opportunity does come, I'm blessed being able to take it. So that's a big freedom for me, because obviously these substances are not in accordance with the law of the land. So I kind of think, you know what, I've still got this freedom, even
Yeah.
though I might not be able to do this, that, and the other like I used to do. So I've not really let it affect me. I've read a lot more books than I probably would have had. Probably would have done if we'd had those freedoms.
Do your when you were doing the DMT for that year, did your kids know what you were doing? Locked
Oh,
up in the room?
that's a question. So for context, my boys are now 13 and 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but when I was doing that research, and it was like 3 years, it was like pretty frequent. So they were, quite a bit younger then. But certainly, so I remember one time I smoked at the top of the stairs, which is a really small area, and I smoked it, and I just was induced into this ecstatic outburst. I mean, laughter, like I just didn't think any human being could laugh like that. And it was like it was being squeezed out of my psyche. And there's no two ways about it. My wife, my two boys they couldn't not hear it. It was extreme ecstasy. So, you come back down after that, and there's kind of like, they're looking, raised eyebrows and looking like, what are you doing? So there's been a few episodes like that, but it's in the latter 18 months of that 3 years of research, I ventured outside, and it would to be typically me laying on a blanket with a couple of pillows and smoke and lay back. And, sometimes I could be there for like, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, as you reflect and you integrate and you think about different things after the experience. So my boys frequently saw me with sunglasses on, looking up at the sky. The reason I had sunglasses on is just to protect, not protect my eyes, but my eyes are sensitive. So if I didn't wear them, my retina started to sting. And they'd ask questions like, what are you doing? There were times I was out there when it wasn't like, sunny weather, sometimes I've been out in the rain or when it's grey, like, what are you doing? And, they've seen me extract DMT countless times, so very slowly they have wheedled some form of truth out of me. And now, it's TV dinners, or rather YouTube dinners, so they'll see things pop up, like, oh, DMT. And when I get a Father's Day card from them, it's like, best DMT dad and DMT professor. I don't know if I mean, they're both doing great at school, so I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and it's good to not make this taboo, because I think because it's illegal in many countries, almost all around the world, people are so afraid, and they're also afraid to ask questions, to even ask questions, especially, in religious communities. Um, you have people who are so afraid and kind of brainwashed to think that it's a bad thing. And of course, it could be a bad thing if taken, if you're not careful, or if you have health issues and things like that. But my friend said that ayahuasca, he feels that ayahuasca and things like that are the holy grail,
Oh yeah, I'm with your friend on that. Yeah, these are very powerful, sacred medicines, and personally speaking, I feel they deserve reverence.
Yeah. So it's good that people are starting not to make it like taboo, and people are starting to talk about it and ask questions and explore. So tell me, if it's not too personal, a little bit about your religious beliefs and your background.
Okay, so again, for context, I mean, my wife is Muslim. She's good Muslim, and she's a really spiritually mature individual,
Hmm.
but with no interest in psychedelics. She may have tried something with me a few years ago, but that's a different story. Whereas myself, I really became switched on to esoteric philosophy, specifically theosophy, and that answered a lot of questions that I'd had since being a little child.
Hmm.
So, I mean, in terms of religion, I've read the Bible, I've read the Quran, both books more than once. So, when you like do a questionnaire, and it's like, what's your ethnicity, what's your religious beliefs, and it's like, it'll list several, or you can put. I wish it had just like have a box saying all of them, because
Yeah.
really, because of my interest in esoteric philosophy, that I take the view that there's some truth in them all, and no one religion has a divine monopoly. There's a golden thread running through them all. And so, yeah, I mean, I believe in them all, but in terms of prayer and commitment, I guess that's personal. That's deep in your
Yeah.
heart, and it's I don't know. It's like I feel like just the beauty of nature is like church for me. And
Hmm.
you get those moments where like just the question, the big question about why the universe, why, how, and it like really gets you deep in your heart, and that to me is like, that's a connection with the ever unknowable, and that for me that's prayer also.
Yeah.
Rather than going to a building every Sunday, or doing something 5 times a day, that's not for me.
And so, have you read the Nag Hammadi? Have you read the
I know about the Nag Hammadi from my fondness for the works of John Lam Lash. I don't know if you know that Gnostic author. So I know about it through him, but I'm not an academic scholar on it.
Yeah, I think you would find it really interesting, and I think you'd actually from what I was reading in your book, I think you would find a connection with that. Because like you were saying, you've read all these books and you've read about all these religions. Well, I really recommend you looking into that. And there are actually companion pieces that explain each chapter because
I
you
Yep,
can't read it. It's
yep,
so
yep,
difficult to understand. I tried.
yep. No, I agree, and I will take that recommendation. I've already had a look at it, but I think what I realized since publishing both books is I have been, in terms of my reading, going back, I have been somewhat limited by sticking with theosophy, and even then, one particular author within that field, Blavatsky. So
Mhm.
I've had quite a narrow and limited view, and now I'm realizing that there's a whole of the world of literature out there, philosophy, Gnosticism. So I
Mhm.
am, reading furiously, and I'm keeping a journal and hoping I can tie some of these quotes into a third book.
You're gonna go down rabbit holes, or it
Oh,
sounds like you already
I,
are.
I am down a lot. At any one time now, I must have 4 or 5 books on the go. Modern books, old books, and I'm loving it. And yeah, I mean, it's all rabbit holes at the moment.
So there was, let's see if I can find it because I did a screenshot of it. Uh, it was a section in your book. So let me see.
Sure.
Ah, let me see if I can find it really quick because I found it interesting. You know, you were describing your experiences and documenting them. And I'd say a little before halfway through, you started talking kind of about, well, if there are these positive forces and positive spirits, are there any negative entities? Um, I don't know if you, oh goodness, I know I airdropped it into, let me see really quick.
Sure.
I know I have it here. You say, uh, you were talking about could malevolent beings with varying degrees of conscious intelligence. Um, you were just talking about, where was it? Perhaps spiritual wickedness in high places really does exist. Perhaps political leadership is subliminally steered. Now, you published this in 2019, correct?
Yeah, is it DMT and My Occult Mind a lot?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the original publication was 2017, and that's a smaller revised version, which, yeah, as you say, 2019.
Um, and then you go on to say perhaps the retention of power by global elites is secured by dark unseen agency. And oh my goodness,
I
to
can't.
read
I
that.
mean, did I write that? I mean, there may have been something working through me when I wrote that,
Yeah,
because,
yeah, and
yeah,
it's fine
yeah.
if you don't, it's fine if you don't remember because it is a lot of
No, I
information.
do remember. Yeah, I do
But
remember.
listening to listening to that now and living in the world that we live in now, is there anything you would like to say about perhaps are there if you think there are negative forces or for lack of a better term spirits, um that are
Steering
manifesting
a
themselves.
culture,
Yeah,
steering a
yeah.
society. No, I think there are, I mean, materialism and greed is a real big factor and a real big, dare I say, problem in society,
Mhm.
and it's a difficult one to deal with because I feel the majority of people are, the wealth and the power is with a small, it's with the 1%,
Mhm.
and I find the majority of people would rather that they want that, they want a share of that, and really, you got to try and find a way to pierce that and say, well, look, that greed is not good. Greed is based on fear. So
Mhm.
it's trying to find a way to sort of get people to like switch onto a mindset that's not pursuing riches and power for the sake of power over others. um and I think psychedelics are a real good way of doing that. And then you begin to wonder, well, how are we ever going to get something legalized or decriminalized when talk like this is kind of like looking up at that 1% and saying, is there no better way that we can run this? Is this really the best we can do? And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just that, really. I mean, I would like more money, but how much is too much? How much is enough? It's I think it's just trying to deal with that kind of mindset with the majority of people, with the population. And I
Yeah.
think psychedelics can help with that.
And was it Terence McKenna who said that every leader should take psychedelics
Yeah, he
before
says
they
it
go
better.
into
Yeah,
office or something?
I wish I could have just like quoted McKenna. Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, I wonder what the future's going to bring when my boys are as old as me now. Whether politicians will be promoting themselves on a platform of their psychedelic experience, and how, I don't want to say how woke they are, because I really don't like the term woke. It's bandied about. So, when it
Yeah.
first came out, woke, I thought, oh, it means people who've tried DMT. And I never labeled myself woke, but inwardly I felt like, yeah, I must be woke. I've tried DMT. But now it's like they talk about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they're woke. And I'm like, they haven't tried that. I don't think they've tried ayahuasca DMT.
Oh,
I don't want to
probably
be called
not.
one. No, I don't want to. I don't want to be called one. And I'm awake. I'm not. There's always something to learn.
You're
But
red
yeah,
pilled.
yeah,
You took
yeah,
the red pill.
yeah. But no, it makes you wonder about politicians in the future. I mean, what's happening in America with psychedelics and cannabis? It's remarkable. Whereas here in the UK, I think we just still a very long way from having a sensible discussion, and that would be really helpful to have that. I mean, we had years ago Professor David Nutt, I think he was the science advisor to the government on drugs, and he showed statistically where the harms are, and it's with alcohol and tobacco rather than MDMA and
Mhm.
psychedelics, magic mushrooms. But they 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 give him the "you're fired," treatment, and
Yeah.
such a shame, such a shame.
It is, because I think it is dangerous for politicians, for people to start thinking outside of the norm. And, you can't, people like you can't be put in a box. Like, how can a politician speak to you if you're not in a box? You
You
know?
know, sometimes we get local politicians coming, local councillors, knocking on the door, canvassing for the local vote, and there'll be two or three from different parties. And typically, I will open the door and they'll introduce themselves. And I'll say, "What's your policy on drugs?" And the look of fright on their face, because they're like, "Is this guy pro drugs? Is he anti drugs? What do I say?" And they just like freeze. They don't know where to go.
Yeah. It's like when you were in your book, when you were talking to the um
West Witness.
Jehovah
Oh, I
Jehovah
love that.
Witnesses.
I love that. Yeah.
I bet the
I,
one who
I,
looked shocked went and
yeah.
tried it.
it went down exactly as I wrote it, and I had a lot of fun on that day. And I've often wondered, I wonder what the guy is doing now. I wonder if he's actually come across other people promoting these substances, and I don't know.
You probably put that little seed in the mind and maybe he tried it.
Maybe. I'd like to think so.
Do you ever, besides that incident, do you ever talk to people about it? Like, people that
At work,
maybe kind
no,
of, yeah, at
no.
work, no.
Well, I've got one really colleague at work, and he knows everything. He's a real good friend. But otherwise, this is not a conversation I can have with work colleagues. It probably wouldn't go down very well with my employer. Hence the hat, hence the
Oh,
glasses,
yeah,
hence
yeah,
the overly dark bedroom.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's sad that conversations like this are so taboo, and they're not burning books anymore, but they're not allowing people to be on Twitter or Facebook, whatever your politics or your
yeah,
ideas are. I think it's such a dangerous thing to start shutting um Twitter accounts down. And I'm not a Trump fan or anything like that, but I just, when those things happen, when
yeah,
free speech starts to
yeah.
disintegrate like that, everybody should be scared.
I, I agree. I mean, even the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, bemoaned Twitter closing Trump down. And she is far from his biggest fan because his administration was spying on her. But she understood the precedent that sets in shutting somebody down. Free speech. I mean, you've got a private platform there dictating
Hmm.
who has a voice, who has the oxygen of publicity. And Trump's far from an angel, but it's does he deserve to lose his voice?
Yeah, and exactly with people are going to start to be more careful about the things that they talk about. And like I said, um some of these substances are illegal in a lot of countries, most countries. I know, like in indigenous countries where there's a lot of indigenous people, South America, um there's still they still do ceremonies. It's still legal. I think mushrooms are legal in Mexico. I'm not sure, but I think they are. So, well, what do you think about the indigenous cultures? What have you learned anything from reading about them or?
I mean, I read Jeremy Nabi's book Cosmic Serpent, and that gave some insight
Mhm.
into it. I mean, my view with especially ayahuasca is I see it as a baton is being a spiritual baton is being passed to the West. Um, I think it's been passed to us, and we're going to run with it. And I hope that these tribes people can maintain some longevity with their traditions and their cultures. Um, I think it's going to be difficult with what's happening in the Amazon with developments.
Mm.
But I think it's really I see it as a spiritual baton's being passed to the West, and you know we're going to take it and we're going to run with it. And I thought that before I'd experienced ayahuasca, and now that I've had several experiences with ayahuasca, and I've had the benefit of being in ceremonies where there has been a traditional shaman from South America, and I've heard him and his family sing those traditional Icaro songs,
Mhm.
and I'm just blown away. I mean, they're clearly songs highly influenced from that realm, and some of them are so capable taking the ceremony in certain directions. Certain songs with the bigger bass and the drums, all of you're halfway through, and then there's a chorus of purging starting with people puking.
Yeah.
And anybody who's not tried ayahuasca thinking, I ain't trying that. And that's what I used to think before I tried it. But I tell you what, forget the purging's nothing. The experience is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But amazing how those songs, they're just so knowing for that state, and obviously inspired by being in that heightened psychedelic state. So but I still maintain that I see a baton is being passed from these cultures to the West, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in years, decades, scores of years to come with the West, and it's how it treats this growing culture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so beautiful, like you said. It's just, and I told my husband that too. I said, don't be afraid. He hasn't done it yet. I said, don't be afraid of the puking because that's part of it. I mean, you're purging all the bad, you
Yeah,
know, all the
yeah.
bad things, and you feel the release, and then you go into this trance, and then you start to hear things that are otherworldly, and I think you mentioned that in your book too, kind of like the sounds and the ringing sound. It's like sound is being broken apart and you're like in a computer or
Yeah,
something. I don't know, it's weird.
especially with free-based DMT. I mean, some people say, "What music do you listen to?" And I'm in a silent room if I'm gonna smoke DMT, because I'd convinced myself I was an investigator and I was investigating. So before, smoking DMT, I'd kind of lay down, I'd prepare myself, and I'd sit up, and 3 hits on the pipe, and in my mind I'm like, be highly observant, be super observant. And it was through that I would listen to the intensity and the frequency of my own amplified sort of interior sound,
Mhm.
and then became familiar. You could palpably feel the arrival of the entity. And the moment it arrives, it's imposing its own intensity and its own frequency, which quickly goes off the scale
Mhm.
and, puts you in this highly mesmeric, immersive state. And it looks like you've gone to another world. And, that's a breakthrough, in my opinion. And yeah, just life-changing experience.
Yeah, and I think for people who don't know that much about the chemistry or the process, that you have your pineal gland, which is a little pine cone shaped thing in your brain, and that's like a receiver for these all this stuff, isn't it? Like kind of like a radio receiver.
Yeah. I mean, that when I talk about, the sound, which in the West is called tinnitus, but I've had it all my life. It's persistent, and I'm very comfortable with it, and became hugely interested, as I said, with when DMT amplified its intensity and heightened its frequency. And surely, when you inhale DMT, the activity within you is certainly from your pineal region. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist or
Yeah.
chemist. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's clearly from the pineal region. I mean, I've had encounters with entities where, they have this remarkable capacity to be able to mold. I suspect they're molding my psycho-spiritual substance into a sort of paraphysical or a quasi-physical substance. So I've had them do that, and the form, I can feel the form, the shape of a triangle, a pyramid in my head around
Oh, wow.
but around the pineal region. And I mean, I've had them form things on my chest, within my chest. But yeah, I had that occurrence where it formed a pyramid within the pineal region of my brain. You can feel it, and you're like, speechless. What can you say? Wow, I'm not going to be able to tell anybody at work about this.
It'd blow their minds, literally.
Yeah, all I can do is write about it and think, I'll publish it, and hopefully somebody enjoys reading it.
Are you kind of like a Superman Clark Kent, like at work you're this like straight as an arrow kind of person, like no one would ever suspect?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a serious story to be told here, because I, I, to be honest, I realized when I'd acquired emotional intelligence how lacking in emotional intelligence I
Mm,
had been, and I put this down to DMT when I became serious about not writing, but just serious about committing to it in an investigative capacity. I gave up masturbating, which had been, you know, it had just been a habit for too long, and I really should have kicked it into touch long ago. But it was emotional immaturity that kind of like, the sort of the pleasure of it made it habitual, or
mhm,
even in marriage, and I'm ashamed to say that. And drinking alcohol, which had never been a problem. I'd never been a big drinker, but I alluded to my time in Africa. And because I couldn't buy any weed in Africa, I started drinking and, smoking cigarettes, and drink was really cheap. So I was drinking more often than I'd ever done in my life. And I said, you know what? I'm going to stop drinking and I'm going to stop masturbating. And that was years ago. And I still not touched a drop. And I keep my hands, I keep my hands. So, and there's a consequence of that, my emotional intelligence has increased, and I think that must have been identified in my workplace because I've had the benefit of a couple of pay increases and a promotion. So, but otherwise, yeah, I'm straight as a die at work. I'm fully committed to my job. It's I've got a family here, and they're my priority.
Yeah. It does change it does change lives. It is life changing. If it doesn't change your life, you're doing something wrong.
I was seeing somebody on Instagram, it's just yesterday, and they were asking a similar question. And I said, it's like, because you've experienced these entities and they're so powerful. I mean, just insanely powerful. And I would go into work and like, the boss, the big bosses, I think I just aren't scared of you because I have seen something you can't even begin to imagine. And I don't know, I think that attitude must have, I'm not saying being observed, but I don't know. I felt different at work. I just feel, you know what, I've seen things you don't even know about.
Yeah.
So any sort of perceived, grandeur from you cuts nothing with me. We're not having that anymore.
But not in an egotistical sort of way,
No,
right? You have no ego now.
Far from it. I'm thoroughly polite and respectful, but I think whereas once there was maybe a degree of timidity, that's gone on the basis of improved emotional intelligence.
So when you're with these entities, what is your approach to it? Do you ask questions or do you just let it all play out? What do you do?
I submit, but there were many occasions at the back end of an experience would I would try and communicate that I'm writing a book, and I'm openly seek help. If you can provide any assistance, this is not verbally, this is mental.
Yes.
Mentally projected. And there were times when I felt it had been heard and acknowledged, but some of those beings are so powerful, I just felt so immature saying it. It's like, the mismatch, the evolution, the disparity between a little surface dweller like myself and this highly evolved being on the, I don't know, Devashanic, that's angelic plane. You're like, you can make your appeals, but really, they know how, as a human being, a long way to go before we get where they're at. And so patience is possibly a key.
Well, they're very cheeky though, they're very in my experience I found them to be very playful, and in your book you describe that as well, that they're, they make you laugh and they do all these tricks and they're just, it's just pure love.
Yeah, I mean, there was one trick that they did several times, and I smoke, and the entity would fill the room and impose its power. There'd be nothing visual, but it's clearly you're in a DMT experience, and it would start to move. It create this sort of paraphysical something beneath the pillow, and it was so spooky. Even in daylight, something moving in the pillow, you like jump up and you're looking under the pillow, and of course there's nothing there, and you go back down and it does it again. And yeah, I mean, there's one, and it was just a light dose. I was messing about and it's a light dose. In fact, I'd taken one light dose, and then 15 minutes later another light dose, and a few minutes later another light dose. And I think it was at this third pipe I was convinced I'd pissed myself, and I'm putting my hand down my pants because it felt like I don't know if I've wet myself. How can that be? And got the sense of something laughing at me so heartily. It's like, oh my god, they got such a sense of humor. They really, really have.
It makes you feel like a child again, but not in a negative kind of way, like in a way of like you have all this wonder.
I mean, many times at the conclusion of an experience, I have just kicked up my legs and just like, like a little child kicks back and the legs are going like that. And that, as a fully grown adult man, must be quite a sight. Thank God I'm on my own. But, that's genuine emotion. You're beside yourself with glee and wonder and ecstasy and awe and shaking your head in disbelief. What's the alternative out there? To go out and drink beer? Is that it? Smoke tobacco, cigarettes? Is that really, as a society, all I've got to look forward to after a hard work at week, to go and get sozzled?
Yeah. Well, now we can't do that anyway.
Well, no, but I found I'm really attuned to people talking about alcohol, whether it's people at work saying how much they've had to drink and what state they got into, or whether it's an advert on the radio or TV or in a film, and people are like, and it's so socially acceptable, and yet it's such a harmful substance. And I don't want to say too much, but the nature of my work, I have come across reports where I'm privy to instances where people have got drunk and they've fallen foul of the law, and talking about life-changing injuries through drink. Come on. And town centers and city centers, obviously pre-lockdown, they're not so good to be in as a family, because there's people getting in such a state with it. And I really hope that culture changes over time. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with you a little bit. I think I don't completely agree because I live in Ireland and
Oh,
the drinking culture here is completely different because
yeah.
most of the time people, they go to the pubs, except for the tourists. They go to the pubs and it's not to really to get drunk, it's
Agreed.
just to,
Yeah, agreed. Yeah,
socialize and
yeah,
meet their friends, and
yeah,
it's a completely different
yeah.
culture, I think,
I
whereas in
accept.
America, people
Yeah,
do go to the bars just to get drunk and,
yeah.
you know.
I'll tell you a story. This is when I was 18, and I wasn't in London at the time, and I was out with a couple of work colleagues, my boss and a work colleague, and they were they were older and more mature than me, and I was 18. I'd never been much of a drinker, but I think I downed rather 6 pints, and I was in a really bad state. And it was a Monday night, and I'm on this bench, and I've got this burger, and my boss and my work colleague are some short distance away, and these three big guys, walk by, and one of them, as nice as pie, says, "Excuse me, mate, where can I get a burger? Because I've got this burger." And I'm like in such a state, and I don't know what, something went through my mind. I'm convinced of that. And I looked up and I just said, "Fuck off." And he was gonna, rightly so, he was gonna pull my head off. And thankfully my boss and my work colleague came over and saved my neck. But there is that side of it too,
Yeah.
where you can become senseless and fall foul of awful situations. But I do accept it's a wonderful culture, also pub culture. I've been part of that. I've enjoyed that, So I'm not saying outlaw drink, but I think if you're going to have drink, why can't we have other things
Oh,
as
yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. And I do agree with you that certainly you can't put alcohol in the same category as DMT or weed or anything like that, because alcohol is, my husband won't like me saying this, but it is harmful to your body as well.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
harming your liver and your heart and all, and you know weed and all those other things, they don't do that kind of harm to you. In fact, there are studies showing now that there are actually healing properties, especially with people who are depressed, who have issues of depression or PTSD and things like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
memory loss as well. I
Yeah.
think I heard that one because you have the connections in the brain. So you can't compare that to alcohol, I don't think. Yeah.
No, it's different qualities. It's amazing the research that's been done. I mean, not just around psilocybin and other psychedelics, but ketamine, a dissociative psychedelic, in terms of helping depression. I think that's it's wonderful. It's good news.
It is. I do want to ask you one more question. Has
Yep.
the DMT and doing these psychedelics, has it have you seen changes in yourself in the world, as far as maybe your intuition has gotten better, or you some people talk about seeing signs or predicting things that are
Oh, I mean, I have this crazy chronological synchronicity with 22 and 23 minutes past the hour.
mm.
And there was something I'd had years ago when I was smoking cannabis. And when I stopped smoking cannabis, it diminished. But then when I started with DMT, this thing returned, but it's returned with a vengeance. And I know all the arguments that, the pros and the cons, it's this, it's that, and we look for patterns. And whatever it is, I don't know, but it occurs with such incredible frequency and so often at the most unexpected moments. Like I can spend hours in a skate park on my BMX, and many times I've come out and got in my vehicle 22 minutes past the hour, going into 23, and I could have left that skate park at any time. I mean, it's such a puzzle that when I do die, and if I get a life review, I want to ask, what can you explain this this chronological synchronicity? But to answer your question, what I have found is that I think it's increased my awareness. I mean, I always feel like really aware of not just what's in front of me, but what's either side of me, what's behind me. And I see other people in the supermarket, including my wife, and we're shopping, and just seeing some people that awareness, it's not there to the same degree. So I put that down to DMT. I found that DMT it's a subtle but significant change in that it's like my stream of consciousness, it's like the tap's been turned ever so slightly. And even though it's only subtle, the effects are significant. Your stream of consciousness has become, my stream of consciousness has become, I'm far more playful, especially with my children, but also with my thoughts. My imagination seems to have increased. And yeah, I've noticed that at different aspects in my life and my relationship with other people and my family.
Now, I don't want to get in trouble, so I guess I'd have to say, for people who are going to watch this, we don't recommend or condone people doing things that are illegal. So I just want to say that, like, I don't want anyone to watch this and say, I'm going to do this, if they're, they have to be very careful about it.
Yeah.
I feel it's something that, if you're going to do it, you should have life experiences before you start. It's probably something you should do when you're having your midlife crisis, which is what I did, because I feel like if I would have done that any younger, I wouldn't have understood what was happening, and it wouldn't have been as meaningful as it was when I first did ayahuasca. What do you feel about
I
that?
mean, I know people who I know people who at a younger age, they have been far more mature, certainly than I was at
Hmm.
that age. I think it's depending on the individual, but speaking personally, I think I'm more with you. I just cannot see myself at 25 having come across this substance and then pursued it so frequently to write a couple of books and be penning a third. I think the age that I found it was ideal for me, as a parent, with, like you say, with those life experiences. It just seemed like the perfect age for me to be pursuing that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say anybody who's. I think the thing with it is, if you feel it's calling you, then
Yeah.
maybe heed that call. I mean, when I first watched Strassman's Spirit Molecule documentary, it was, I knew without a doubt I have to try that. It's without question. But some people hear of it and they're like, yeah, maybe. And that's not calling them. When you
Yeah.
hear news, if it's like, I gotta try it, then it's calling you. Like you say, you got proceed with caution. These things are not just illegal, but highly illegal, you know, the class A substances. And that's what we're faced with at the moment.
Yeah, and you don't want to be not ready for it because it is so powerful, and if you're not, if you're not ready for it, you could have a bad experience. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of people who have had bad experiences with ayahuasca and with mushrooms and things like that. So,
Yeah, I've had challenging experiences. There've been thankfully fewer. I prefer not to use bad, but challenging. And I
mm.
think from those trips, to be fair, I've probably learned more about myself and more about the actual experience than on those where it's just ecstasy or unimaginable playfulness. And whilst they're great, those that have challenged me and shaken me, probably where I've learned more about myself.
So tell me, what is next for you? Are you working on
Yeah.
another book or project, or
Yeah.
what's going on?
So the plan is to publish a third and final book in that series, which will be DMT and My Occult Mind 3. That will be the final. That's contingent upon me being able to have sufficient experiences to put in a book. But I want to also try and address that question about who are these DMT entities, you know, because
Mm.
there's a wealth of esoteric and occult literature out there. You know, it's almost like take your pick. At the moment, it does feel like sort of, you know, stick the tail on the donkey blindfold. But I'm coming across some really wonderful literature, and you know, noting that down and quotes from there. At the moment, I'm just 4 experiences into the toad medicine, the 5-MeO DMT. Had an experience 2 or 3 days ago. That was my 4th experience, and I mean that stuff is just so powerful. I mean,
Is
and
that the
very
stuff that Mike Tyson did?
yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, now I know
yeah.
what you're talking about. You
No,
smoke it,
I,
or how do you ingest that?
yeah,
Mm.
smoke it, and rather than, you know, 3 tokes as with free based DMT, this is just one pull,
One mother.
keep it down, and then hold on tight. And you know, I mean, you know, I'm conscious there's people out there with a vast amount of experience with that substance, and I'm not here trying to be the alpha male of DMT world.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to write a book that promotes these experiences in a positive way, and hopefully something that somebody will read and enjoy. And like you were saying earlier, you know, if it helps somebody to change their direction in life, then that's great. But yeah, toad medicine, ooh, that
So what
is
is that like then? If you can describe a little bit of it, or it's
no,
indescribable.
no. I have so much experience with free based DMT. I had this preconceived notion that 5-MeO DMT probably sent out a very different signal to free based DMT, and it would be a very different, more higher, more powerful entity that interacted with you. But I think I've got it totally wrong, because I'm 4 experiences in. I've not had any real sense of entity interaction, but I have to say, hands down, it's the most powerful experiences I've ever had. It's just off the scale. Yeah, so there's quite a way to go with that. I hope. I hope I can
Yeah.
keep committing to it. I mean, funny, my 3rd experience, that was about a week ago, and I had no qualms committing to it. I was like, we're gonna do it, let's do it. We did it. It was like, oh my god, you know, the reverence, the strength, incredible. And then you know, a few days later I got this 4th pipe, and it was like back to free base DMT. It was like real trepidation. I really had to force myself to like
Yeah.
sit on bed and like, let's do it. And I did it, and it was so powerful. But yeah, I mean, yeah, powerful.
You're just going on a journey. No wonder you don't really care about what goes on in this
No,
world. It's like,
I feel with 5-MeO DMT, there's going to be less of a story to tell than with the entity interactions. But you know, it's early days yet. I'm documenting what I'm doing. I'm not being too wordy or long-winded. I just want to be accurate, truthful,
Mhm.
succinct, and let's see what we can do.
Well, I think that's great. I think that's fantastic because I think the more knowledge we get on that, and I know you said you're not like a scientist or anything like that, but it's collective knowledge. And I think everything is valid at this point, not just a scientist or a hippie out in California. Like it's great to see that more people are starting to wake up to this and
Yeah.
starting to kind of and I do hope for a day where it won't be a taboo conversation and we can actually you won't have to hide we don't have to hide from our employers. It can be something that could be celebrated, I think,
That
instead
would be
of
wonderful. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it feels a long way off at this stage, but
Yeah, I know,
that'll
especially
be
this
good.
part of the world, I think.
Yeah.
No, not so much in the States and of course in South America and Mexico and things like that, but I feel like, yeah, it's there's a long way to go here on this part of the
I mean, we've
world.
got such. I mean, these isles have got such a great heritage with
I
esoteric
know.
philosophy and literature, and Europe, and it'd be great to kind of like get behind that and pursue it, in an investigative capacity, which is what I feel I'm doing. And I think, I love, as much I can understand it, the neuroscience and the neurochemistry, and that's a valid lens to view this through. But I'm biased and prejudiced, of course. I
Yeah.
personally feel that an esoteric and occult interpretation of these experiences will ultimately be the most meaningful and the most accurate. But that's because I'm looking at these experiences through this lens.
Exactly, exactly. And I can't wait to read your next book. And I hope that you will have another conversation with me
I hope so
because
too.
we'll have so much more to talk about, I'm sure.
Thank you for having me here. It's been
Oh,
wonderful. Thank
thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.